A dirty little secret in the world is a lot of organizations don't have a strategy. They're just kind of floundering around. We talked to hundreds of people and they articulated what they wanted from us: customer orientation, truthfulness, collaboration. And I added one on top of it, which was
Brad Englert spent 30 years inside one of the world's largest consulting firms, logging thousands of hours of conversations.
And with his new book, Spheres of Influence, he shows us how to unlock the skills people need for mastering the art of influence.
What do you think when you hear that Gen Z is going to outnumber baby boomers?
we need to get them to retire so that Gen Zs can take over the world. I think the boomers kind of overdid it. In fact, I had a partner say, Brad, you're working too hard. Throttle it back, take your vacations, and set yourself as a good example to your team. And that was brilliant. You don't have to.
What does it take to say, we're going to change because that's not working?
I met with this professor. I asked for advice, and he said, get out of the office and tell people you give a damn. And that was the best advice, because you got to understand your boss, your customers, your direct reports, and in some respects, it might be easier now.
A 30-year-old is at the beginning of their career. What's the number one thing that they need to do?
Well, there are three principles that they need to follow. Number one,
Welcome to What the Tech, your gateway to business strategies and tech secrets shaping today's workplace. Let's welcome to the podcast, Brad Englert. Brad, did I get that right?
yeah, perfect.
Okay, awesome. Thanks for coming on today. Let's just jump right into it. If somebody's here cruising through the podcast list and they see, wow, I see Brad and Rolando and Dave's face. What's this episode about? Let folks know what your mission is. You've written this book, but what is your mission?
Well, my mission is to help people grow in their careers. Fortunate to work for the firm Accenture, and over 22 years, they really did a great job helping me learn the skills to become a partner, starting with technical skills and then getting in management ranks. But from day one, you were expected to have a mentor, and you became a manager. You were still a mentee, but you became a mentor. And the culture was about growing people to become partners. And there aren't just a finite number of boxes in the organization at the firm. The more you grow your people, the bigger the firm gets. When I started, there were 40,000 consultants. Accenture now has 700,000 consultants
Oh
worldwide.
my. There's
So,
room in the world for that many consultants.
well, we're kind of the engine inside many companies. They basically hire Accenture to run their IT. So
Hmm.
just Accenture inside.
You know, it's interesting with everything happening in the world today, how Accenture has grown, but the need for IT consultants is, you go hand in hand. And you'd think that
Mhm.
with what's happening with AI or what's happening at information at people's fingertips, at organizational fingertips, maybe the reverse trend would be just that. Like, why do we need consultants? We got all the information we need right here on our phones or computers. What's up with that? Tell me why consultants are needed more than ever.
Well, I think the technology is really the easy part. It's people that are hard. I had a manager who went to Texas A&M. She had an industrial engineering degree, and we were implementing this project, and the client was being kind of horsey, and she goes, Brad, I have the wrong degree for this job. I need a psychology degree. And that was actually pretty correct. You have to work with people to be successful, and technology won't get you there without someone to help guide the way.
I've always said something very similar to that. Tech is not hard, people are hard.
Yes.
The people don't come with a manual. You can figure out a computer, a program. There's a manual for it, right? A, B, C, D. People don't come with manuals. People are complex and complicated. And one of the things that I really liked about what you've got in your book and the things that you're talking about is that there's a way to succeed in the workplace exerting influence. If a 30-year-old is listening to us right now, they're at the beginning of their career.
Mhm.
What would you say to them? What's the number one thing that they need to do?
Well, there are three principles that they need to follow. One, in any business relationship, understand their goals and aspirations. What are they trying to achieve? And then ask yourself, how can you help them achieve that? Number two would be set and manage expectations.
Mhm.
Easily said, not often done. And then third, genuinely care about their success. When I got to the university, I met with this professor, 40-year professor, who I worked with on a statewide network design, successful implementation too. I asked for advice and he said, get out of the office and tell people you give a damn. And that was the best advice because you got to get out and understand your boss, your customers, your direct reports, your vendors, and you can't do that being holed away in your home office.
What I'm hearing is you want to be passionate about helping others and doing that behind your desk without meeting with customers or clients or being face to face with your boss. It's probably a difficult thing to do. But how has that changed, during the pandemic and with the change of, remote offices, working from anywhere? Do you find that it's a challenge for folks to kind of get out in front of their stakeholders so that they can build these relationships?
In some respects, it might be easier now. And now that people are more comfortable with Zoom, I worked at Ohio State University, I worked at the University of Michigan, Illinois, Columbia, Vanderbilt. We didn't have Zoom in those days. So it would have been really helpful to be able to use the tools we have today. Accenture has always been virtual. I was a partner and did not have an office. I
Hmm.
had a home office or I was at the client. And I had for 2 years a team of 90 professionals across the US. And I would get together with my leadership team every Friday for a call, good old fashioned conference phone. And we would talk about what are the priorities coming up? What are the staffing opportunities? What can we be doing better? And then twice a year, we would actually meet in person. In addition to that, I would visit the client sites all across North America, and I referred to this metaphorically as my Winnebago trips. And so I would go to Whirlpool in Michigan and meet with the client, meet with the team, take them to dinner, and they loved that. I would meet all the team members and say, how's it going? Any issues you need help with? And we did 360 reviews at Accenture.
Hmm.
The staff loved the Winnebago tours. I took the time to get out of my office and go see them on the ground and see our customers on the ground.
Did you actually take those trips in Winnebagos? Because that would be
I
amazing.
wish I had. It'd be like John Madden in the bus.
The Madden bus, yes,
I,
absolutely.
I did have a yellow Mustang one time to go from Chicago to Benton Harbor. That was cool.
Hey,
Ooh.
if you're
It's
going to
kind of a
drive long distances, you want to drive in style for sure.
it's a monster car.
So, what really made those Winnebago trips so successful? Why do you think that really resonated with the teams that you were meeting with?
Well, I think the prior leadership did not do that. And it's a matter of showing the flag and be in person, showing them that you care. Walking the walk is basically it. And, I think you can't do that from your home office. And I learned a lot. You see where they stay, you look at the work environment they work in, you learn a lot.
Mentioned something. I just said showing the flag, and when I think of flag, I think of warrior. I wanted to know, you've had a very successful career in corporate America. Is there an avatar for the type of person that succeed? Is it the happy warrior? I know that word is getting thrown around a lot lately.
Hmm.
Is it
Hmm.
is it a happy warrior? Is it the charging hard kind of person? Is it the person that has influence but laid back? What are you finding that in your career, the folks that move ahead, is there kind of an archetype or an avatar for that type of person?
I like the happy warrior avatar. I think that's pretty apt in a good way, not battling way, but you're fighting for what will make your customers successful. You're fighting for what will make your direct report successful, what will make all your staff successful. And, that's not a passive approach. And It's more fun. You have more fun when you're really focused on the people and helping them be successful. Because if they're successful, you will be successful.
There are folks that are going to be listening to this and thinking, Brad, how can you do that today? 24 years at one organization? In today's age where, in a drop of the hat, an entire department's gone, outsourced to another country. Would you advise folks that are going into whatever career they're in, to gain as many skills as possible so you're more employable and you have other skill sets? Or, I'm going to be the guy or gal at this company and I'm going to stick it through and I'm going to make my way to the top. Where do you land on that?
Well, I think it depends on the culture of the organization. I was lucky that when I did my research after graduate school, I really needed a company that would focus on training and teach me the technical skills. I have a
Hmm.
liberal arts undergrad degree, a master's in public policy. My master's research was the use of computers in government. So I knew that was a field I wanted to go into. But there was a Wall Street Journal article about Arthur Anderson and their training center outside of Chicago and how they took people like me and put them through a 3-year apprenticeship program and then guided them into management roles. So I went from managing $1 million projects to 20, $30 million projects with 200 people. So you have to be in a company that the culture helps you grow in your career. If not, then you need to go somewhere else, find a different role. My whole plan was to get the technical skills, management skills, and go back into government because I was working for the federal government when I was going to grad school. And I did that. It just took me 27 years to get back into public sector.
A small detour of sorts. I just saw a study recently. Ori, can we pull that up with the Penn Foster study? They did something that I had not seen before in terms of Gen Z and trends in this nice long article that they have about 10 workforce trends to expect. One of the things that they cite is a Forbes article that says Gen Z will outnumber baby boomers in the workforce. And when I read that, I was like, whoa, and we're going to get into the whoa here in a moment. I know that's a word of yours that I want to discuss, but like, whoa, this is crazy because I think it could certainly change the workplace. And we're already seeing some of that. What do you think when you hear that Gen Z is going to outnumber baby boomers? Do you think that when they come into management roles, senior management roles in the next 5 to 10 years, that the workplace will look different and they actually will have an impact? Or is this just a lot of hopeful, wishful kumbaya thinking?
No, I think that it's a good trend. Advocating about work-life balance. I mean, that's not a bad thing. I think the boomers kind of overdid it. In fact, I had a partner in an annual review say, Brad, you're working too hard. You're actually setting a bad example for your staff.
Everybody looks worse next to you.
And it's like, you need to throttle it back, take your vacations and set yourself as a good example to your team.
Mm.
And that was like brilliant. It's like you don't have to kill yourself at work. So with Gen Z valuing more of a work-life balance and doing meaningful work, I think that's all good, much better than, nose to the grindstone and, who
Yeah.
cares if you have life balance or not.
You're not wrong, Brad. There was a Brad Johnson when I worked at Altria. He's way ahead of his time. So he was a very senior leader in the organization. He was the SVP of sales for 3,000 sales folks like myself and
Mhm.
managers. And he was getting a lot of reports. This is again before the internet, before all the beautiful, wonderful programs that we have now. We're constantly having to work on the work, which is spreadsheets and sending that up to district managers and section directors. Is there a way we can not have to do that on a weekend, on a night? And he kept hearing it as he kept traveling. He didn't call them Winnebago trips, but he went around the country listening
Mhm.
to different managers. One day he gets on, and not everybody had cell phones, but we all had voicemail called Octel. He put a message for the
Yeah.
entire organization. He says, as of today, any new reports that are designed to be rolled up, that was the term we used, rolled up to management have to be approved by me.
Mm,
And if there and any exceptions, they have to go through me. So like everybody below him, he set the pace, he set the tone. He said, this is not going to work. Basically, we want our people out there,
right.
like what you said, out there talking to clients,
Exactly.
out there
Yep.
engaging rather than filling out spreadsheets. He had the courage to do that because not a lot of managers wanted that. They don't want to have to, wait a couple of days for the information to be fed through the system and back to them. They want, oh, you
Mm-hmm.
do the work for me. It's interesting that some leaders can buck the trend and some just, I don't know, I don't want to say courage, but maybe there's another word. I don't know if courage is the right word. You tell me, what does it take to say, we're going to change because that's not working. Let's go over here.
I think it is courage. I
Okay.
had someone who said they had this scenario and they asked if they did it right in their career. And the person had worked in a company for a couple of years. And just one day, the boss started boxing him out of meetings, wasn't listening when he spoke. And after about 3 weeks, it's like he got time on the calendar and sat down with the boss and said, did I do something wrong? Why are you treating me differently? And the boss looked at him puzzled and said, oh, I have trouble at home. I didn't realize this was affecting me in the workplace. He had the courage to go in there and talk. And so, yes, you do have to have the courage. Some people would be scared. They would suffer in silence, they'd quit, you know, and he went in there and basically asked the question. I have two phrases in the book. One is use your words. If you want something, you need to use your words. If it's with your boss, if it's with your direct reports, if you don't tell them, the other phrase is they're not mind readers. So, they can't read your mind. And if you don't use your words, then your productivity in your organization is going to be rocky. It's going to
Hmm.
be not productive. And so when I got to the university, it was central IT, 330 people. We have 54,000 students, 4,000 faculty, 21,000 staff. So a big, big place. And our culture that I inherited was heroics. We're going to fly in and solve the problem like Superman or Superwoman. And heroics was being rewarded. Well, I didn't want heroics. I wanted proactive thinking and planning and anticipating problems. And that's what I wanted to reward. But that was very intentional. And I had to communicate those expectations to my direct reports. And after about 6 months to 9 months, we slowly started changing the culture by articulating the values of the organization and by communicating what was expected and rewarding the behavior you wanted.
And how did your team respond to that change in culture from being the hero that's putting out a fire to preventing the fire in the first place?
Well, we started with an IT strategy. We had no IT strategy. And a dirty little secret in the world is a lot of organizations don't have a strategy.
Hmm.
So they're just kind of floundering around. And when I got to the university, they had just finished a university wide strategy. So I aligned our IT to that strategy. And we talked to 300 or 400 people on campus, all the deans, all the VPs, graduate students, undergraduate students. We bought pizza. We talked to hundreds of people and they articulated what they wanted from us. They wanted customer orientation. They wanted truthfulness. They wanted collaboration. They wanted proactive thinking. And that became our values. And I added one on top of it, which was family first. Now, why did I do that? Well, I'm in Austin, Texas, which has many multinational IT firms, tons of startups. I can't compete on salary, but what I could compete on is promising a balanced lifestyle. And I had a network engineer, got an offer from a startup, lots of equity, etc. I met with them and I said, look, I don't say this to everybody, but if you don't like it, you can come back.
Mm.
Hmm.
Literally 2 weeks later, He calls and says, "This startup is a zoo. They feed me and do my dry cleaning because I never go home.
They want you
And
there.
I took the job because I wanted to provide for my family, but I'm not seeing them anymore.
Hmm.
May I come back?" He's still there 20 years later, you know?
Wow.
So articulating the values, and then some of my direct reports self-ejected when they couldn't align to those values. And then I hired in people who totally aligned to those values. And I wanted them to do the same with their teams. And I actually wrote a blog once a week. I would talk about strategic events that are happening, new learning management system, new email for faculty and staff, voice over IP. I mean, we basically irritated everyone every year of some transition to the cloud, ending up with Workday HR payroll, which was much better than the old system. But I would also give kudos. When I heard customers saying good things about staff, I'd put that in the blog. If we screwed up, which, 250,000 devices on the network every day, of course things screw up.
Sure.
I would apologize and say, "Here's what happened. Sincerely regret it. Here's what we'll do to keep it from happening again. Please forgive us." And that was a two-way communication because people would respond to those blogs. It went to 330 people in my organization and about 300 people interested in IT at UT. And, people would say, "Oh, Brad, it was really good. You want to reward people in real time." And then I would talk about, if you're sick, stay home. Don't come in, be a hero, and get everyone else sick. Don't check email all night. Take vacations. If the kid has a school play, go to the school play. We have 330 people here to back you up.
There's a lot of people out there, maybe the Silicon Valley types and some startups, and I would say that there's still a lot of corporate America that would totally disagree with what you just said because they want, right? They want kids straight out of graduate school or college, to be hard charging, you know, going in guns blazing, right? And just going 100 miles an hour, probably putting 80 hours a week if they can. When I first started, one of my bosses said, well, you could do that while you're watching TV. And after a while, I'm like, hey, wait a minute. You don't tell that to the other guys on the team or gals on the
Mhm.
team that have a family. Why are you telling me that?
Yeah, that's
Right.
right.
And I was looking in that research piece on what the Pew Research Center that talks about this culture, because you hit culture and one-way communication. The hot topic right now, obviously, one of them is AI, but the other one I think is definitely work from home. And because people during the pandemic said, hey, there's a better way to do this.
Yep.
And basically what this said is that what Pew said is that upwards of 35%, there it is. 35% of individuals in roles conducive to remote work are now working from home on a full-time basis. And
Mm.
that's a shift due to technology, a response to external circumstances. And, people are seeing, wow, I could do this from home and be just as productive. But, there's folks that have been around the workforce, that they're the obvious ones. We don't even have to repeat who they are, but that say, no, you're going to bring your butt back to the office, even though the evidence is right in front of us that
Mhm.
it produces better outcomes. People are happier. You make more money. There's less spent on recruiting. You can still have a great culture, like what you're talking about. You
Mhm.
improve the culture, actually.
Right.
And that can happen even in a remote or distributed work environment. Tell me what's keeping some managers and leaders from embracing this.
Well, it's probably nearing the twilight of their career, and we need to get them to retire so that Gen Zs can take over the world. I just don't believe that, especially in certain jobs like IT. Why do I need my network engineer to be fighting traffic and finding a place to park?
Mhm.
I'd rather he be in his bunny slippers, or she, and work from home.
Right, right,
But I had a boss who was my age who did not trust his employees, including my organization, to work from home. This was before pandemic.
right.
And, he just didn't trust us.
What does that say about somebody? Why would they not trust the people they hired working with? That they just generally don't have a trust for people and getting things done? Or That's just the way it was. It's been for 100 years. Everybody sits at a desk,
I think that's part
types
of
their
it.
keyboard, and I go walking around the floor and he's working, she's working, he's not.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. And they may be untrustworthy.
Hmm.
Interesting.
The one thing that I regret in 30, 40 years in the workforce is trusting people who shouldn't be trusted. And, it's like I got better at identifying them. They tended to be never held accountable for anything, gossiping about others. So you knew they're gossiping about you to that others, just taking credit for work they didn't do, shifting blame. So I think you have to have your antenna up, especially when you're working with peers who may not be trustworthy. Be aware.
Hmm. What would you say to an aspiring leader who's, maybe they're in their late 20s or their early 30s? What would you tell to an individual that's joining an organization, again, aspiring to be a leader for that company? Some advice to maybe a mind shift change that you would offer to someone in a position like that?
I would start with the boss. So I'd sit down with the boss and say, I'm thrilled to be here. What are your goals and what are you trying to achieve? And how can I be part of that success? Sometimes people just slip right through. They don't take the time to find out. In
Hmm.
the consulting world, all partners have sales quotas and the quotas get bigger every year. It's not secret, So I made sure every year I made more money for the firm than my salary. And then I tried to make even more. So when all the sales got rolled up, my boss looked good. Same thing with people working for you. Just sit down and talk with them. Where do they want to be? Do they want to be CIO one day? If so, when I go on vacation, I'll put you in the role. See how you like it.
Hmm.
You want to not want to be CIO because it's kind of a tough job. You want to be an engineer? Great. I need engineers. So I'll try to get you where you want to be, even if it's not in my organization. So ask your boss how you can help them be successful, set and manage those expectations, and really show you care about them being successful. Here's a good example. I had a type A partner boss, and everything was urgent, urgent. And I got a call from her. It was about 5 o'clock. I was actually trying to get out of the office to go have dinner with my wife. And the phone rings. Brad, I need a white paper. A white paper. And I literally said, whoa. I didn't say no, because that would have set her off like a rocket. I said, whoa, when do you need this white paper? Oh, I don't need it for 2 weeks. I meet with the client in 2 weeks. Okay. I thought it'd be tomorrow. How many pages do you want this white paper to be? Oh, 3 pages. I was thinking 10. Do you have an example of white paper that you did in the past? Oh, yeah, ask David. I did one on XYZ Corporation. Well, guess what? I went home, came the next day, found someone to help, gave them time. Here's the example. Here's the research you need to do. Can you get it to me in a week? Sure. So I was able to get it to the type A boss 2, 3 days before her client meeting, and the boss was happy. Before I learned to say, whoa, I would have called my wife, canceled dinner, stayed up all night, and delivered a 10-page paper that the boss would yell at me because it didn't meet her expectations. A lose, lose, lose situation.
And that would have set off a domino effect of additional negativity from, beyond that, because you've canceled things, you've rearranged your schedule. And then if you did deliver the 10 page and it was too early, your boss wouldn't have received what they wanted, and you would
Right.
have spent all that time, doing that. So it's a negative effect on yourself and kind of promoting some negative culture there.
So I had a customer who asked me to come lead this multi-year transformational program. And it was kind of in the ditch, and they had all the pieces to be successful, but they had never done it before. So they asked me to take over the program. And I said, sure, I'd love to come help. And I'm having lunch with the provost and the chief financial officer. And I said, this was in October. I said, the only caveat is next summer, I have a vacation scheduled to Australia. 3 weeks. I was a Rotary Exchange student in high school. I've been back a couple of times with the family, but last time I canceled the vacation because of work commitment. And I promised my family that next June, we actually already had the tickets bought. We had the passports. We need to go on this trip. So, oh, sure, no problem. So we get to April, met our first major milestone. Yay. Got to May, and we're meeting with the president, CFO, and provost. And Mr. President, just want to remind you, as I have the last 3 months, that I'll be going to Australia in June. Diane will be in charge. I think it's the best time to go. It was. And because things were kind of clickety clack at that time. And the president's hands start shaking. He was scared. And so I'm slow mo canceling my vacation when the CFO and the provost both said, Brad, wait, hold on. Mr. President, when Brad joined us in October, he told us about this vacation. It's important to him. It's important to his family. And we assured him he could go. We should uphold our commitment. My customer is defending my vacation.
Nice.
So I went, had a great time, didn't check email, didn't check voicemail, didn't check Octel. And 10 years later, I'm having dinner with the CFO and our spouses, and we talked about that situation. And you know what he said? He said, when you were gone, we were scared to death.
And why was that? Why were they scared to death?
They thought something would go wrong and I wouldn't be there to fix it.
You had a team though, right?
It was because they had committed to let me go, they had that override their nervousness,
Mhm.
which is the
Interesting.
quality of that leadership team. And I love that client.
And the fact that your customers stood up and defended your thing, which was, hey, look,
Yeah.
I've let you know I'm going. And they're like, yeah, no, he should go. He's put in all the work.
That's using your words, and that's setting and managing expectations. And it's helping them be successful, and it's genuinely caring. So it's those three principles time and time again.
You mentioned something about communication not being one way, it's a two-way street.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about something Simon Sinek said about the most vetted people on earth when they join an organization. He was talking about the Navy SEALs. And the
Mhm.
Navy SEALs have a way of vetting people. You could have a hard charging, overperforming individual, or you can have somebody that doesn't perform to that level, maybe a little bit less, but they're like what you said, trustworthy and reliable. Reliable was the word that he used. The Navy SEALs found that the overperformer that consistently overperforms, they're just more abrasive. They're tough.
Mm.
They're not open. And in an environment like you're in, that's, critical. Seconds matter, information, communication, coordination, collaboration, right? That'd
Mhm.
be moving it into our space, collaboration. You need all those things to really be successful with others, right? If you
Right.
operate in a vacuum and, goals be damned, I'm going to achieve them no matter what, that's going to cause some problems. You're going to come off the wrong way, maybe too abrasive for a lot of people. And it's interesting that the Navy SEALs see that as their best way to succeed, especially in tough environments,
Mhm.
midnight, all hours around the world, missions, all kinds of stuff that they do, that's the individual that tends to work out best.
You used a word that is so important. It's trust. Trust. How do you build trust? You build trust by doing what you say you're going to do. You build trust by being truthful. It's like if you continually help your client be successful, they will trust you.
How do you start
And
that conversation? What's the opener there? Because there's people that are listening to us that are salespeople, and they say,
yeah,
"All right, Brad. All right, Brad. Let's just role play real for a second. All right, Brad. I'm gonna buy into your spheres of influence and trust. How do we get that going?"
you ask what their pain points are. You ask, how can you be of help? You may not be of help. You may be selling something that doesn't solve their problem, but you may know someone or something that will solve their problem. There are times when I would talk with a customer, I say, I'm not really the best person for that, but I know the best person for that. and I will connect you to. 5 years later, I may be in front of them again, and I will be the best person to help them out. I had a sales team manager say, my people don't know who their customers are. They're all transaction oriented. They don't know if the customer has kids or go on vacation, or they never take the time to get to know the customer. And so they had like 50% turnover of their customers. So they were making numbers, but it was like the bucket had holes in the bottom.
Mm,
and
mm.
and so once they changed to a relationship development model and he changed out his team, they had like 80% retention. Accenture has 80 to 90% retention. Well, why? Because you're helping your clients be successful. They trust you to help them be successful again.
And that environment is very challenging. I had some friends that were there when they started at Anderson Consulting
Hmm.
before they became Accenture, and it wasn't, easy street, for entry level folks coming in, trainee,
Hmm.
and getting into the Anderson way. If you're someone that's newly hired, or maybe you change jobs, you want to build that trust. And then you talk about this in your book about, influencing others. How do you build genuine connection with others, especially if you're the new person in the organization?
Certainly start with your boss. If you have direct reports, work with them. If you have customers, identify who your best customers are and go meet with them. And peers and influencers. You might have peers in an organization that you're working with, and it's all going to be better if you work together than if you're in your silos working apart. And so when I got to the university, I made sure I met with my peers at the vice presidential level, at the associate dean level, and I would ask them, how can we be more effective? So, give you an example. The vice president for campus safety and I met every 4 weeks. It wasn't a matter of if there'd be a problem, it's when there would be a problem and how would we handle it. We had a bomb scare, we had a shooting, we had a murder, we have 100,000 people show up at the stadium every Saturday. Our organizations work together to keep people safe. We have 3 emergency management centers. The main one for the executives, the backup in my building in case that building's burning, and then a third one in my peers' building way off on the other side of campus. I had to make sure all that technology was flawless. And we had to use copper because the network might go down. And
Mhm.
we tested it every 90 days to make sure it was working. And then he and my team would get together once a year and have a tabletop exercise of disaster. We had an ice storm, so staff couldn't get to campus. We had a cybersecurity breach. We had tornadoes spinning off hurricanes. So Austin didn't get a hurricane, but we get tornadoes off hurricanes. We had a power outage. The campus actually generates its own power, backed up by the city. Power went out the next year. Well,
Mm.
we had already planned and practiced what would we do if there's a power outage. My peer would hear rumors. Brad, I heard a rumor there's not enough diesel in the generators at the data center. Hey, good rumor. Let me go check. So I checked with the data center manager, and he goes, well, we actually top up the diesel every month and we drain it and replace it every year. And the other generators use natural gas. So good rumor, but not true. But I was able to call him right back and say, hey, good rumor, not true. And he snuffed it out right there. If you didn't have that two-way communication with your peer, that could have festered and turned into a big problem. Another peer was the woman in charge of teaching and learning on campus. And she wanted to flip the classroom where lectures would be recorded and then you'd have more discussion in the classroom. Well, the tools we had for the classroom, the learning management system was old 80s technology, buggy, clunky, and it wouldn't scale. In fact, we could not securely hook email into the learning management system, which is ridiculous. That vendor also was the worst vendor I ever had to work with. They were unresponsive. They didn't care about us except once a year when they came for their check. And it
Their
was always
renewal.
10% more. And one time I hired them to do an upgrade. It broke things that had worked for 5 years. So
Oh,
I'm sending flaming emails. I'm on vacation in Baku, Azerbaijan. I'm sending a flaming email from Baku, Azerbaijan, saying, I have 54,000 of my closest friends showing up in 2 weeks, and you broke stuff that used to work.
oh my God.
So we went to the marketplace and found the latest technology of learning management systems in the cloud, very user friendly, standards based, so you can plug things in securely and quickly. And the faculty and students picked the tool. So I took it to senior leadership. I said, we have strategy to replace this key system for the campus. And the president said, well, what do the faculty and students think? Well, they picked it and they unanimously recommended we move to it. It took 2 years to make that transition, but the solution was so good, it just pulled people to the new solution. And they hated the old one.
Oh,
It was so clunky and slow.
so it
And
worked out, right? It was, I'm sure, a crisis at the moment. Yes, you're on vacation in Azerbaijan, and you're like, many, many, many hours ahead. So,
right.
people, you're up and they're sleeping, kind of thing. So I can imagine that was probably pulling your hairs at that moment, and like, what in the world? Why? What is happening over there? And today, a lot is happening very rapidly. There's a lot of new technology happening that's evolving with AI and a whole lot of stuff. Where would you say companies should be looking at, given that you've been in IT, you've been in the academic world, are there things that companies should be really looking at because these things are a game changer for organizations?
Well, you need to have an overall strategy. We talked about that. Your IT needs to align to the strategy, and then you need to refresh that strategy every year because your priorities will change every year. And we would always have an experiment with some new technology on the list. And for us, it was move as much as we could from on-prem into the cloud because we weren't very good at capital planning and replacement. And it's kind of a hamster wheel to keep all that updated. And over 8 years, we moved many of those services to the cloud. And after I retired again, my successor in March 2022, in 2 weeks, increased VPN, increased Zoom, and 70,000 people went online to do teaching, learning, research, and work. That
And
could
that
not
was
have happened. That could not have happened. My first year was 2009 H1N1 swine flu. No way we could have gone online. And that scared the heck out of me. So over 8 years, we made that change. So if I'm a company, I have my strategy, I update it every year and fold in any new technologies that look promising.
Wow. So start with a plan because that's where things get popping, and then start thinking strategically about how the new technology fits with the vision. Brad, I love this. There's so much to unpack here. I think we're just scratching the surface. But if you were to leave us with any words of wisdom here, which already you have done that, what are we missing here, or what haven't we touched on that's still very important for people to know?
I'm going to go back to the beginning to that professor. Get out of the office and tell people you give a damn.
Indeed. All right. I like that. I like that. Brad, you get a clap up for that. That's wonderful. If folks want to follow you and check out what you're doing and see other things, and hey, Brad, come to my organization. We want to do some of this. Where can they do
Mhm.
that?
I'm on LinkedIn, very easy. I have a website, bradenglert.com, but I'm going to send you guys a customized link to
Okay.
my website, and it's going to customize for your podcast, and it's going to have a link to some free material to read,
Okay.
get a
All right.
sample. Number two, links to how to buy the book. There's the ebook, audiobook, blah, blah, blah. And then third, you can schedule time on my calendar.
All right. So let me plug that in. So when we do some of this, there we go. Thank you, Ori. And if you want to check out the spheres of influence, as well as more information on Brad, We've got that. If you're listening to us and you want to see it, we have it on our video side, but you can go to bradenglert.com and there'll be a link. We also have a link in the description where you can get some of this information as well as information on the book. And there'll be a special offer there as well. So you want to go ahead and check out those links in the description so you can get in touch with Brad or get the special offer that we have going with him. All right. So Brad, I want to thank you for coming on today, dropping all kinds of wisdom, absolute gems on us. I'm sure that folks that are professionals will definitely check that book out because it's got a lot of good stuff in it. And if you've been nerding out on this episode with us and you're wondering how can you get involved or support us, hit that subscribe and follow us. We really appreciate that because that lets us know we're on the right track, as well as bring you wonderful guests like Brad, who can drop serious knowledge from their years of experience. And for those folks that are businesses out there and you've got some complex IT problems, that's exactly what we do. We help businesses and organizations work through hardware and software issues so that they can get to the crux of those problems, just like what Brad was talking about. And we've been doing it for 20 years, actually over 20 years now. So if you're looking for a trusted partner in the IT space, check Global Tech out. We've got links in description that will allow you to do that. And Dave, we were just recently talking to Fran Saley about the future of work, given that so many people are going home and what's happening with commercial spaces and why so many of them are going away. And the doom loop. What the heck was the doom loop? You remember that?
Of course.
We talked about the doom loop. If you don't know what the doom loop is and you want to find out, go check out that episode with Fran Saley on What the Tech. Dave and I will see you there next time.